Representative John Benson is on the DFL ticket in Senate District 44. That's Minnetonka, Woodland, and Plymouth. State Senator Terry Bonhoeff is the incumbent state senator, and John is a DFL incumbent running for re-election again in House District 44B. Our colleague, Audrey Britton, is campaigning for House District 44A to the north. John, I know you're a hard campaigner. You've been out going door to door. What are the voters telling you?
They would like government to be efficient, to provide decent services at a reasonable cost, and I agree with them.
When you go out door to door, are you handing them literature and telling them what positions you take, or do you kind of,
Sure.
is it a listening session for you to learn what they have,
Well,
what's
both.
on their mind?
I do have a piece of literature, and it outlines my voting record on areas like education, job creation, government reform, tax policy. I'm on the local property tax division, and so I was very involved in trying to save the Homestead credit, for example.
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, the Homestead credit is a 44-year-old program that is kind of unique to Minnesota. And it's a rebate for people who are working class, middle class, on their taxes.
It reduces the taxes.
It reduces the taxes. A little credit for to encourage people to have home ownership. And it's turned out to be an important benefit, especially for people who are on fixed incomes, who've lived in their home for many, many years, and at $300 or $400 a year. For someone who has a small pension or Social Security is important. It provides an opportunity to pay for medications or food for a month or more. And considering all the ways that the legislature spends the $34 billion or $36 billion
the annual budget, right?
Right. To take $300 from someone on a fixed income, I felt was unfair. It's something that people had counted on, and it had been a good program. So one of my objectives, if reelected, is to restore that Homestead credit.
Do you think you'll get bipartisan support for that measure?
No.
Really?
I hate to say there was not a single Republican who voted with me to save that program, either in committee, and by the way, I introduced an amendment to restore it 3 or 4 times. I think it was 4 times, and the vote was unanimous on the other side. Now, when a party is in the majority facing a shortfall, you do have to look for savings or revenue, or I think a combination of the two. But then it's incumbent upon you to be even more careful.
How's that issue received when you're talking to the voters on a door-to-door basis? Are they in favor of having that put back in place?
Well, for people who pay their taxes as I do twice a year, they're aware of it. But I think a lot of people who have an escrow account or whatever, is simply slipped in and they haven't even noticed it. So one of my jobs is to get them to notice it.
John, I know that you in your former life were a teacher. As a matter of fact, you were honored by being named Teacher of the Year. Tell me about what's going on in education funding, and what do your constituents tell you about that?
Well, again, this is a major issue in the legislature. It's been going on now for over 10 years. We've had the structural deficit. Presently, the legislature, even after we had the shutdown, which was another unnecessary thing, it cost
the 2011 shutdown
cost the state millions of dollars in unnecessary expenses. But the legislature chose to borrow $2.4 billion from the kids, and then claimed that we had balanced the state budget. And that means that local school districts have to go out to the voters and ask for operating bond issues again, which means increase in property taxes on residential properties and small businesses. And you don't borrow the money for free. You have to pay interest on it. So
you're talking about the districts have to.
For the districts have to do that. So one of my objectives is that we move quickly on that and to pay that back to the school districts. Business in the state of Minnesota is looking for people who are highly skilled, and that's not going to happen unless we have highly educated population. And it starts with early education, K-12 education, but also our technical colleges and schools as well, having tuition that people can afford to pay.
Well, a certain senator, actually, Senator David Hahn, who represents Eden Prairie, I can read a quotation that I looked at. He says it does no harm to withhold that money from the school districts and give them an IOU, promise to pay. Do you agree with that?
If you don't have to pay any interest on the money you borrow, I suppose there'd be some truth to that. I think most everyone understands that even in the best of circumstances, it will take 10 to 15 years to pay that back to the school districts. This is the greatest amount of money ever borrowed from the school districts. I don't see any indication that the state, with the kind of revenue stream that we have, will be able to pay that money back anytime within the next 10, 15 years.
Well, aren't you going to be going into another buzzsaw of a deficit when you go back to St. Paul after you're reelected?
The estimate is somewhere between $3 and $4 billion shortfall.
Well, is that going to mean more borrowing from the school districts?
I have no idea. I suspect it's going to depend on which party is in the majority. If the Republicans maintain the majority, then I suspect more of the social safety net will be cut, Minnesota Care.
Well, let's restate
like
that. The Republicans will not maintain the majority with programs like that.
Well, I'll do my best to see that it doesn't happen.
Good. Well, how does this lack of funding reverberate through the system?
Well, again, in order to try to balance the state budget, the majority party, the Republicans, voted to cut about $180 billion from University of Minnesota in Minsk, which is the largest cut ever. In
180 million.
180 million, largest ever in state history. And that's going to mean either the colleges and universities will have to cut back on some of their course offerings, or most likely it means greater increases in student tuition. If I have a chance to introduce legislation again in the next session, one of my objectives will be to try to restore some of that, but to direct it into direct student loans and grants, especially in those areas that we know there are shortages or openings. There are technical jobs available in the state of Minnesota that our local businesses have not been able to find qualified people to fill. How about if we give an incentive to young people to go into those areas and those technical skills? They're very well-paying jobs, they're very secure jobs, they're jobs that cannot be outsourced. Let's direct some of that money to our students. So instead of having young people in America now with more debt in student loans than people do in their credit card debt, let's see if we can't do something in that area.
Democratic Visions is handmade by volunteers through DFL Senate District 48, Eden Prairie and Minnetonka. Lori Pryor, Chair.